What is up, everyone? This is your host, Erick Holtzman, and welcome to the Mindful Motion Podcast. All right, I'm here with Keith Shimon. Is how you say it?
You can call it Shimon, but I like Shimon.
Shimon, okay. Make sure I get it right, man. We're here to discuss how you can enhance your exercise experience and create a pain-free body through custom evaluations, perception tracking, and identifying constraints and variables to maximize your self-awareness. These are things that I don't know much about, so I'm actually really excited to hear about this stuff because I'm always looking for new cutting-edge ideas to help people improve their exercise. And apparently these concepts, they can help you improve your ability to learn new positions and movements and make you more adaptable and resilient so you can have long-term success. Keith is a husband, a father, personal trainer, certified muscle system specialist, and a licensed massage therapist. He's the co-owner of Body Activation, which is a custom-tailored exercise gym helping those that want to exercise pain-free out in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He's also the creator of the Biz Body Podcast, which is a business-centered podcast for personal trainers like myself. And Keith began his career working with hundreds of elite athletes ranging from NBA, NFL, NHL, and Major League Baseball, and has pivoted to the challenging field of working with people with pain and aches and trying to help them essentially feel better and live a high quality of life. So why don't we jump in, man? And I'm really curious to hear your background into the fitness journey because I don't know it.
Well, first of all, thanks again for having me on, Eric. It's an honor to be around and included in with the same level of the high quality guests that you had on previous podcasts, and I'm honored to just even be here. My fitness journey, like a lot of other people's, started out with my own injuries, and I played basketball through high school. Baseball through high school, and some 2 years in college for basketball. And playing sports, having my fair share of injuries, I wanted to be able to rehabilitate myself. I wanted to be able to understand how to increase my performance, how to also recover way faster, so that I could hopefully make it to a D1 program. I played D3 basketball, and I transferred after I got my Associates of Arts, because I was at a 2-year university, to a 3-year university that specialized in exercise and sports science, physical therapy, and business. So that was La Crosse University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So University of Wisconsin La Crosse. And what was fascinating was through this whole journey, when being fascinated with elite level athletics and with understanding sports performance at that time, there were some heavy hitters that were out of that university, like Dr. William J. Kramer. That, I mean, if anyone is in the exercise space, they know his role on hormone function and exercise, and also recovery and exercise. He was in my first job outside of my internship and graduate level coachingship is what they called it at the International Performance Institute it's called IPI. It was a voluntary academy at the IMG Corporation in Bradenton, Florida, is where I ran into a whole bunch of amazing coaches. And Dr. Kramer, outside of that job, was a part of the advisory board that we got an opportunity to talk with on several occasions about current studies, ideas for a place called Perfect Competition that we started. Pete Bomarito and I, actually, I was the very first. I was the first coach there, and Pete was my director. He's like, "I'm going to be coming on, I promise." Months later, they finally came to a resolution of a contract so that we could start Perfect Competition, and I was there for several years. We trained hundreds. I mean, our NFL Combine athlete list was usually around 30 to 40 combine athletes that were invited. We had about 70 pro day guys and about 100 to 150 NFL vets. And then I was in charge of Major League Baseball, which we built to around 35 to 40, of which other coaches that came through actually Some of them became Major League Baseball strength coaches. So we were doing stuff at a very high level, and then I realized that a majority of the people that we were training were able to recover very well, and that's what made them elite, along with their abilities. So that was a huge pivot for me into what I do now, because my father was diagnosed with ALS. 17 years ago since. He's passed away 16 years ago. And what was really interesting at the time when he was diagnosed and I came back, because he literally stopped breathing, and I just flew back home and stopped everything. It was right after I became a licensed massage therapist, along with my exercise and sports science background, undergrad. It was, I saw what he was going through, and with certain neurological disorders, people just, no matter what they would do, it would just disintegrate, and you wouldn't see people getting better. So I spent, from that moment on, having a better understanding of physiology, neural anatomy, concepts of motor learning, and then also understanding pathology better, along with any type of chemical interventions that were going on the medical side, so that I just would have a better understanding. And I've been working on that weekly ever since that time. So that's a really fast progression from everything that happened previously in sport to now. So it's been a fascinating journey thus far.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's really tough. That's a really detrimental disease. There's not much treatment for that.
No, there's not. And what's most interesting piece about that, though, is that, I mean, think about how many other diseases and idiopathic conditions that, like, people haven't just found out, like, how and what's the cause of whatever is going on with them, and there are many professionals out there that are thinking that they can help, or that they want to offer their help, and yet it may not be helpful for those people. It may actually make them worse, and that's really where when I saw my father going through physical therapy, and I know a lot of amazing physical therapists. There are times when physical therapy is too much. There's times when massage therapy is too much, and there are times where the activity that is that the professional chooses to intervene with can actually make things drastically worse, because some people just will not heal from those challenges. So,
yeah, I mean, it's one of the hardest parts of the job is dose response and what's the adequate amount, right? And
that's the part of it. Yeah, completely. Dose response, signal to noise, understanding what am I even looking at, and also base education on material continuums, how the body reacts to things, how the body learns, what is memory, what is sensation, and then what is personal responsibility, in order to then communicate on the practitioner side, and then the expectations of the client side. Those are some of the major pieces that I believe are breezed over, and it would be really helpful, especially now, if a majority of the people that came in to learn about exercise were understanding of how people can learn with their bodies and with their minds, along with how that can change sensations they do not like, sensations that they do like, rather than the outcomes they believe that they are hoping for. I think that's really important.
Yeah, belief comes into the mix time and time again, and either is a helpful thing or holding someone back. And wow, what a powerful component. How do you navigate that with belief with people and your clients? Like, if you see they have a belief that might be problematic, and you want to encourage them to go towards something different, like, what's that look like?
That's an awesome question. As a professional, I'm fully transparent with everyone that comes in. I'm very serious when people come in, because the majority of the people that now come in, they have something going on. They have a condition going on. They have a medical condition. They have an orthopedic condition, neurological condition, or they just do not feel well. Other people are coming in, they're trying to protect themselves. And that makes a whole lot of sense because it's still a sales transaction. And I want people to know right off the bat that that I have a certain amount of time in this invested. You have a certain amount of time invested in this. We're going to share that together. We have upfront contracts on verbal contracts of the amount of time it's going to take, what we're going to talk about. I tell them exactly what's going to happen so that they can tell me what they're going through and what their expectations are. And then from there, I can see if it's a good fit. So right off the bat, the professional relationship is completely set up by managing expectations and getting to a real objective, because I believe that a majority of people, their objectives are skewed. They're thinking that they want one thing, and we're speaking the same language. Like they want to feel better, or they want to move better, or they want to have higher quality muscle. But you and I both know that a majority of what's going on is, can a person become more coordinated with different tasks and with different challenges, and then can they retain that ability? Because them understanding that, them seeing that progress, number one, experiencing the progress, so they know the progress happened, knowing that they retain the progress, and then also, or maybe not retaining the progress, so they're actually in charge of what they're perceiving, becomes a really big part of any progressive process. Because if they don't know they're progressing, I'm not convincing anyone they're progressing unless they experience it. So I have those measures in place right from the get-go. I tell them exactly how it's going to happen because we agree upon how it's going to happen. They tell me how they like to see the progress so that I can put it in those terms. And then from there, we actually put together, we don't put goals together, we put these objectives together. So then overall, I believe goals require a certain amount of motivation. This is about, am I capable of helping somebody become, and this goes into the nonlinear pedagogy, the stuff that Robert Gray is talking about for how humans move. I think that's his book, and also movement variability from like Keith Davis and Newell, and they're talking about how do you help somebody become, how do you deliver autonomy, or help somebody with their autonomy, so that it's not about motivating them, it's about inquiry, it's about exploration, it's about finding out what works in that individual's perception, so that they can recognize when something is actually effective. They can recognize what works for them, and then they can articulate that back to you so that you always know what's working and what's not working, and they can do a better job of articulating that to you.
Yeah, that's a very sounding complex array of topics and detail. You just present it in such a fluent way. So,
well, there's a simple way to put it. I just ask a bunch of questions without, while I'm being open-minded, without like a ulterior motive to my question. So when somebody's experiencing something, or like say I'm doing a set, and they're doing their first petition, and I'm seeing how they're doing this thing, and as they're doing it, they got a weird look on their face, and I'll be like, so you have a weird look on your face, like I make an observation. You have a troubling look on your face. Is this something that's hurting you right now? And they can, why not? I feel it here in my shoulder. And it's really wild when somebody's doing something for their foot and they feel it in their neck. I'm like, is this normal that I feel it in my neck? And so now I can make sensation connections between what somebody's experiencing and then what their sensory motor output or connections could be facilitating, because they felt it there. There has to be a connection to something that's in that area, which is fascinating.
It's so fascinating and a head scratcher. What is your take on that type of situation? I have some background, similar education that you do, so I have some ideas. But for people to hear when they're doing something, working their ankle, and then all of a sudden they're feeling it up in an upper extremity or something? Like what's going on there?
Well, I think that's one of the most fascinating questions in exercise. And I think that leads us right to the core of what exercise could be for people. And I mean, most people have no idea what pain is. Most people have no idea what strength feels like. Most people have no idea of what an ache is, and the
When you say
categories of these
know
things.
what that is, do you mean like they don't know it from what actually is happening inside the internal components, or is that what you mean?
Well, partially, right? So, did you go to gym class or physical education? Sorry for those gym teachers out there. Physical education teachers, that's another joke, and or health class, saying, okay, so this is what a pain response is in a human perception. Here's a pain sensation. Here's what has to happen with nociceptors. These nociceptors are polymodal. They're giving you different types of information that are sent all throughout the body. And then here's the delta fibers and C fibers, and from there you can your brain in your central nervous system is making a decision to send other sensations to different parts of the body so that you perceive them in a different way. So it's like this complex idea that could be simplified for many humans right out the gate since day one in PE and health class. So it's like, here's what a pain response is. So if people understood the fundamental idea that humans are different materials, have different sensors carry different information that has to be sorted out so that you can then, in the configuration of time and space, the materials you own, can then feel something somewhere, anywhere. And then from there, you're able to then perceive a sensation. So that if it's always a summated effect of all the materials and sensors in your body to then say whether you're okay or not okay at this present time in space, then it's more effect going to be that bias towards the material, like how the materials are in the body. So it could be joint, it could be skin, it could be teeth, it could be eyes, it could be nervous tissue. And then from there, am I okay doing this thing in space? Am I successful at navigating space? Because if I'm not, if something's in my way, then I will have some sort of protective response or pain response. So then do I believe that with that type of body view that I need to mash my tissue or compress my tissue or stretch my tissue because I believe those things can happen, or stick needles in it? Or do I believe that I'm going to then help the body understand how to attach to previous knowledge, because that's how humans learn the best. It seems to attach new knowledge onto previous knowledge in a bunch of different amounts of variability, because you find constraints, and now you're looking at, okay, do it this way. How many different ways can you do this thing? So you did this single leg, say any random crazy exercise name, like a single leg RDL, right? Because some people will know, oh, Romanian deadlift. And all of a sudden, everyone's got a certain picture in their head of what that looks like. Well, what if you took a 10-degree wedge and put somebody into slight inversion or slight eversion or slight dorsiflexion or slight plantar flexion? What's their experience like then? Do the sensations change? Can they do it? Can they not do it? Is it high risk because their balance is awful? There's all these really cool ways to introduce variability by just changing constraints up slightly, changing the resistance profiles, changing up points of application of forces, and then writing down what happened, what they experienced. And then from there, how do you want to either repeat it or slightly vary it so that they can have new experiences that can transfer to other things outside of the gym, outside of the exercise experience? Because I believe that's what people are really looking for, is to be able to do what they love pain-free.
Yeah.
And so how else are they going to build tissue without the stimulus in the with the previous knowledge or the memory? So like having an understanding of memory to then attach the new stimulus to, so that they, when they fall asleep and with adequate hydration and adequate protein intake and without chemical stressors just bogging them down, allowing them to then build new tissue, and then strengthened connections, so that they now have transferred a certain level of permanence, which is what motor learning is about. Is like, does it have a level of permanence to it? So, and that's what I believe that we're really trying to do with exercise. And that's why I think a lot of people don't exercise, because they believe it's for sport or aesthetics, where the majority of people just want to feel better, and they don't think exercise can even do that for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sad thing, is that most people are exposed to exercise in a certain vacuum with a certain type of way, and then
usually as punishment.
Huh?
Is that it's usually as punishment.
Yeah,
like, go run laps or go do push-ups.
It's hopefully a changing tide in the industry. It seems like slowly it's starting to grow into more than just sports and performance, at least in that context. So what you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, but backtracking to the idea of doing an ankle exercise and your shoulder and neck starts hurting. In some cases, that might be something is going on where your nervous system doesn't feel safe, and maybe that exercise is pulling out a stress or adding stress to the system, so your brain concludes pain here, even though that pain might not be what is actually going on. Is that kind of in the way of what you said?
Yeah, pain is rare. I believe that from what I've researched and what I've read from the NOI group and many papers on pain, many reviews on pain, is that these summated responses can be multifactorial, and there may be damage to certain parts of the body, yet a majority of damaged parts of the body go completely like pain-free. I mean, there's some literature out there that talks about like how there were like 235 knees scoped. I believe not scoped. They were imaged. They were, I think it was off MRI for, and these were all asymptomatic people. Like in their lifetime, they maybe had some knee tightness, but right now they were asymptomatic, they're pain-free. But yet 97% of those people over the age of 50 had something going on the knee, from like torn cartilage, partial torn menisci, maybe some frayed tendons, some ligament damage, whatever, right? But they had no pain. So then, does damage or age-related changes to materials always equal pain that's local? I would say majority no. I think a majority of the time it's usually summated from a bunch of stuff that's been damaged, and then you just have trouble. The person has trouble controlling all these pieces at one point in time, and the brain's like, I don't have the torque generating capability or the sensory ability to be able to put this movement together, so I'm just going to tell you to stop. So I'm going to send a pain response out to these different areas, and you're going to stop, and you're too deconditioned. Because remember, the way I learned about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like information comes in a vast majority of ways. It can come chemically, electrically. It can happen with force transduction, and information can also chemically, electrically, force transduction. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
Maybe internal psychology too, I suppose.
Well, and that to me is more like that's all chemically, right? Because like interactions of chemicals with interactions of past neuronal discharges in circuitry. Unless
you want to believe that thought and consciousness exists in some non-physical thing, but we don't need to go down that.
Right? Yeah. Like the mind versus the brain kind of thing.
Yeah.
For sure. And so these circuits are constantly being enforced or reinforced, is what it seems like. So if these circuits are being modified and these connections are being strengthened, and so the also on the chemical side, the last thing I was thinking about was fuel sources. So how people utilize fuel sources is also a form of information as well. Because if somebody is they're not utilizing creatine phosphate very well, that 0 to like 30 seconds is going to suck. And then if they're not utilizing glucose very well, then that like 20 seconds to 2 minutes plus is going to suck. And then if they're not able to stoke the fire for beta oxidation, then they have other problems. So I think that information comes in various forms that could be utilized in order to find qualitative and quantitative measures that can really benefit from baseline info to progressions off of that baseline info.
And, you know, I think it's so hard. I mean, and just this morning I was with a client and she has a lot of arthritic changes in her knees, her spine, her ankles, her fingers, ligamentous damage. And she's been doing really well. And then just recently she picked up something and her back's been really bad. But normally it's always her knees that are really bad, right? And
the shift, right? The shift of sensation.
Yeah. So now it's all her back. And I'm like, how are your knees and hands feeling? Oh, they feel fine. It's overwhelmed her system.
Yeah. And what I think is really important for an audience to understand is that there are these different endurance qualities that can happen locally and systemically. There's different chemical markers that can be analyzed within the blood that are right now really easy to look at. There's some great courses out there from Dr. Tommy Wood and Ben House that does a whole. It's pretty cheap too. It's like $500 for a advanced blood work course to understand when somebody is maybe chemically compromised, and then maybe they need to seek medical care like before they even start with you, because like, how do you know they're dehydrated? How do you know if they're like going through some hyperlipidemia and or calcium score is crazy, you know, or their ApoB is off the charts? It's like, are they taking cardiac time bomb? So, or are they, is their insulin how is their insulin sensitivity, and which predetermines how they're going to be utilizing glucose during their exercise, right? So those things can be documented, and then from there make decisions on how someone's going to move forward with this exercise experience, along with the physical data, like how does somebody move locally, how is the local endurance, and then how is the submax heart screen to be able to do systemic endurance that is appropriate based upon somebody's injury history, if there's any damage to any joints, so that they can do this endurance type work without the repercussions of overexertion.
That's challenging sometimes. Even the lady I was just talking about, like if your knees are really, really bad, it's pretty hard to find a cardiovascular approach.
Right.
Detrimental.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's a great example. So what are some ways that you can induce a cardiac, or I would say a prolonged endurance activity, if somebody has compromised knees, a compromised back, compromised hands? that in hand lies the challenge, because you could go, depending upon if she has hypertension, like if she's doing well in that range, you can go isometrics and do really controlled, slow movements of myo and plyo with isometrics for a certain time interval. But that's very doable. And then with low rest, repeated again within that energy system to see how she recovers. That's a very doable thing for, and I wouldn't call that cardiovascular training. I'm calling systemic endurance training. So because everything's being worked. You have muscular systems being worked. You have different energy systems being worked. You have the heart, the lungs being worked. And then also she can go through any type of breath work, which is also cardiovascular in nature, in order to then see what maybe her CO2 tolerance is, so that you can fit the right type of breathing and respiration work, along with, if you want to do that respiration work with myos and plyos, or eccentric, concentric contractions of the torso leveraged, you know, so you can do all those things in order to see what that response looks like for her.
Yeah, breath work is it's a fascinating thing. I do. You ever done Wim Hof?
Oh yeah. I had a breath work coach at the beginning of COVID because I was freaking out, like a lot of people were, and we went through like a bunch of different modalities. What do you think of your experience with Wim Hof?
It's very euphoric when you're holding, right?
Mhm.
It's trying to get to a place where you surrender when it starts getting uncomfortable, because truly you have enough oxygen. It's just a psychological process of you not fighting that discomfort as you're holding your breath for like 3 minutes. It's you're panicking, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's basically inducing a self panic attack.
Mhm.
And the studies that I've read on from a couple different labs, they talk about they categorize it as cyclic hyperventilation, or TUMO, and the amount of epinephrine that you release actually constricts blood vessels of the brain.
Hmm.
So it's an interesting response to, okay, if somebody wants to use TUMO or Wim Hof style breathing or cyclical hyperventilation to spark the nervous system, very interesting stuff. Right? Like you want to induce, okay, I want to get ready, I want to get my system going. Doing it on a daily basis, I don't know if you want to expose yourself to that much internal epinephrine. I don't know. But that's also why Dr. Huberman, Andrew Huberman of the Huberman Lab podcast, his lab looked at 5 minutes of meditation, box breathing, which they did a CO2 tolerance test first to understand like how long you're going to inhale, breath hold, exhale, breath hold. Cyclical hyperventilation, and then cyclical sighing, which was a really interesting mode of breath work that I hadn't tried before. And I've also tried something called breath of fire, which is forced expiration. So and there's another one called victory breath, which is about the vibration of the back of the throat, which is supposed to give you different responses of calm. But the cyclical sighing was full inhale, then another slight inhale, and then full exhalation for 5 minutes, and that was shown to be far superior for calming even than meditation or Wim Hof or TUMO, cyclical hyperventilation, and then or box breathing. But the other ones also had their own benefits, so it's not like the other ones didn't do anything. They just seemed to do different things.
Yeah. You got to decide what kind of stimulus you want to create. And for me, a little epinephrine every day sounds nice.
Caffeine and epinephrine, right?
It's weird though, because you say you're spiking epinephrine, but it's so calming after you're done. My diaphragm feels like it's moving better. But yeah, I mean, you take someone with a really high tone sympathetic, autonomic system baseline, and you do that, it could be maybe not the best idea.
Right. If they're already having panic attacks and anxiety, it's like you're going to deliver more. And it may be beneficial for some people. I would say that it would be very interesting to see an individual response to each, because, I mean, everyone responds differently to different things. And having more tools in the toolkit, and at least understanding the biases towards how I'm using a tool, and knowing that I'm biased on how I'm using it, which is exactly why why I picked the tool to begin with. It's still, there is a possibility that the tool will not do what I think it's going to do, and that's okay. I can switch tools.
Yeah, 100%. And if anyone is interested in doing Wim Hof or knows what it is, please don't do it while you're driving or in water. First time I dabbled in doing that, I was driving, and I was like, okay, I'm not doing that. That was
Passing out while driving.
That's a good idea. So you mentioned this biomarker analysis thing just recently, like a few minutes ago. I'm curious, like, how you use that, and I think it's a crazy tangent, because there's this connection between pain in our muscles and in our body to organ function in such odd ways. Especially, I kind of think is what you're alluding to. So how do you tie that into with what you do with your people?
That's a great question. And what was interesting is what I was looking for was a way to then find a way to bridge the gap between beginning a process of self-care and then the medical system, so that we could share a common language. So then my understanding of physiology, my understanding of biomarkers that are going to be used by the MDs that we are that we're in concert with, that we are in communication with, that I just have a better understanding of what would be on, what would be flagged, would be like a red flag would be like, hey, they got to watch this. It would be nice for you to watch this. And then you should talk to your medical provider about this. Like, I believe that you should talk. It's up to you. This is where these markers are at. And there are different biomarkers, courses that are really, really effective for understanding the scope of practice for an exercise professional. So that if you have access to these data, that number one, you protect the data because it's their personal information. So I take that very seriously. And then second of all, I'm not their doctor, right? So my goal is to understand, okay, if these trends of how this person, how their sodium and how their vitamin D and how their lipid profiles are coming and overall, like, how does that function into how they sleep and how do they recover and then how do they feel? I'm going to use as much info as I can that I could see, well, this may be a part of this decision. So the courses that I took, I mentioned, was Dr. Ben House, Tommy Wood have a great I think it's called advanced athlete blood chemistry. And then Dan Garner has got I think he's a adjunct, or not adjunct. He's one of the mainstays for Barbell Shrugged right now. He's got a advanced nutrition course. I think it's called his Nutrition Mentorship, and it's a fantastic course about the basics of physiology, how to apply that knowledge towards nutrition and training, and then what different biomarkers and blood markers, salivary markers, urinalysis, stool analysis could show you if somebody wants to go down that rabbit hole, and or what can even be done about it. As far as someone's scope of practice. So because all of it is, it's very new, especially when you're talking about microbiome, gut health, you're talking about hormone function, the difference between free hormones and then metabolized hormones to then assimilate the idea of, okay, let's go this route with the least amount of steps, because somebody could just be dehydrated, somebody could just be getting poor sleep. Is your questionnaire then helping that process to say, like, hey, maybe if you're not sleeping well, and here are the different symptoms around your sleep, and here's how you're waking up, and you're in a brain fog. Have you ever talked to your doctor about doing a sleep study? Mm-hmm. And because you believe, and then I can ask a question, do you believe that your sleep could be directly impacting your recovery for your joints? I mean, if you're 70% water and you're constantly dehydrated and you're drinking 20 ounces of water a day, when the guideline is usually 0.5 ounces per pound of body weight, I'm like, how underhydrated do you believe you are?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Found out my best friend, he's that guy. He only drinks like 1 20-ounce sparkling water a day. I'm like, dude, how do you not feel sluggish and like just asleep all the time? I don't get it, but he's just used to that. And you get used to what you're doing and you don't even notice that you're not feeling well.
Right, dude. It's that hormetic effect, that allostatic effect, that then says, like, what if you're right around your normal homeostatic line and your ability to exert outside of that and push that little hormetic boundary, and you're not okay just a little bit outside that homeostatic range, it's like you're not going to feel good, and you won't even realize it because it's been happening for decades. And so it's like, if you just have poor habits for decades that you could clean up with very little cost and very little effort. I mean, just having knowing that you have a 20-ounce cup next to you and you're filling it up and sipping on it daily from the time you wake until 3 o'clock. I mean, chances are you're going to have all the water you need. It's like it's these if then statements that can be these habit forming processes that you don't need willpower. It's just, what is your choice? What are you going to do? It's just like if you're building a business, it's like you do these habits, you try to create something that really helps you connect with other people to help you change your community, rather than being the next fad, which is usually the exercise thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what's sexy, man. Get lean in a week or whatever the new thing is now. Maybe it's 30 days. I don't know, but
6 minute abs.
Yes, that was a good one. Whatever. I don't know, man. If you do 6 minutes of abs, I mean, your abs will be pretty toast.
Every day, right?
You touched on exercise design. We kind of talked about that indirectly. I'm wondering, for the people listening, like how important is designing exercises for someone's unique physiology? And when you run into an exercise that everyone's supposed to do, like squats, and it doesn't work out well.
No, for sure. Especially if you don't have legs, right?
Yeah, that's not usually coming into someone's mind. But right. Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the process with that?
Yeah, I mean, right. Completely. That's exactly why assessments are so important. I was really frustrated with the assessment processes that I had in the past, and I built off of them. And I was very fortunate to run into many different people that provided me insight into why they do the assessments that they do. Range of motion, understanding somebody's resting heart rate, their breath rate, understanding their blood pressure, knowing how they move in space. Does it change when they're standing? Do they bias body weight from one leg to the other? What type of medications are they on? What type of injuries have they sustained? What type of activities do they do for their job? What type of sports have they played? Have they been in motor vehicle accidents? Have they had whiplash, traumatic brain traumas? Have they had any injuries to their hands or feet? Right. So all these come into play with, again, neurological metabolic function, so that I can make decisions on where to start. And I think it all comes down to where to start, because there's a reason why a lot of people don't exercise, is because they felt like crap when they did it. And so they're like, oh, I can't even do this, right? I can't do this. I don't like exercising. Well, guess what? A majority of the people that come in, when I'm like, hey, we're going to be doing these exercises that we're going to build and construct, and the ones that I want you to do are the ones that actually help you feel better. But I'm only going to know if you feel better if you tell me. So I start with that. So then I actually start constructing all of that based upon, okay, I have one person that had close to 50 whiplashes because he was like a wakeboarder, water skier, and he's in his 60s, complaining of lower back pain for 30 years. Yet no one, like, everyone's working on his back, but no one's addressing any of the type of higher motor function that comes from whiplash and traumatic brain injury. That's a problem. Guess what's making a lot of the decisions, right? So the coordination aspect of timing, motor recruitment, motricity, and then understanding like how these things are fitting and how they feel, quality and quantity of these measures. I won't know until I ask them open-endedly, so they know what their experience is. And my favorite is when a lot of technicians say, like, just, I'm the professional, I know what's going on, just do this. No, that's not true when it comes to exercise. It's not as simple as doing squats. It's not as simple as bench pressing. Eventually getting, and the idea of these names are funny, like bench pressing. So the idea that, okay, if we're putting together custom approaches so that eventually you become more variable, so you can accept new challenges and you can do random stuff and feel good about it, so that you know when, okay, I'm approaching a risky movement, because it's about risk and benefit. Like, who's going through this? Why are we doing this? What do we believe is going to transfer for this outcome? And then what was their experience, so that I can get that reporting objectively and subjectively, so that I can then go from that to see if they've improved doing the same thing or something that is slightly varied from that. Because yes, repeating things does help, but so does changing the constraints. Has been proven time and time again to help with motor learning. So that's especially what nonlinear pedagogy talks about, and movement system variability talks about, is this idea of, okay, are we adding variability slightly in changing the way that we're presenting the variability to help people explore. Okay, if you do this, what would happen if you just focused on pushing through the ground? Like what Gabrielle Wolf talked about with these geocentric cues. What happens if you try to reach your hand towards the wall instead of feel this in your quad or feel this in... Okay, outcome-based stuff tends to become easier with geocentric goals, geocentrism with their person's focus rather than egocentrism, where they're focusing on themselves, right?
Focus on the target.
Yeah, focus on a target, focus on an external outcome tends to increase output anywhere between like 15 to like 30 or 35%, something like that.
Does that transfer after you do that external geofocus thing and then return to the egocentric? Will it transfer?
That's something I haven't practiced. That's a great question. I mean, a majority of the time when I say, okay, push up, okay, now squeeze your deltoid as someone's going through, say, like abduction. That is a manual push, a manual resistance push. So it could be biased, it could be skewed, completely skewed, because like getting that 100% correct and repeatable is impossible. So like the idea though, when people do a myometric or concentric into a dynamometer, force goes up. So it's very interesting to see the output and get better. So and I'll keep changing out my external cues. When I see somebody struggling, I'm like, hey, it looks like you're struggling with this. Do you want any feedback? I'll actually ask them, right? So instead of just saying like, push to your toe, straighten your knee, I let it go because the higher amounts of transfer seem to happen when there's way less verbal input from a coach.
I indirectly started doing that as I started getting better at this job. Is I just don't even cue until you see a reason to cue or say something, or they don't feel it where you want to feel it. But yeah, like why overwhelm them with instructions?
Oh, completely. Paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned you dropped these terms: constraint-led approach, differential learning approach. Like what are those exactly?
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. So constraint-led approach is exactly what I talked about, where you have these different constraints that you can change things up, right? Like you can scale your constraints, like say a big bar versus little bar versus machine versus like, do you want something that fits the size of the individual? Do you have tools that can be used? It's like saying having a child use using a regulation basketball versus like a kid's ball. So scaling your equipment, you could do different rules, right? Like, okay, only do this off the edge of your foot. Well, what can you do? Okay, do this in sand. What can you do? Do this on your knees. What can you do? Right. So you just deliver these different constraints of maybe your level of restraint. Right. So you can shift all those up. You can also scale size and space of an area, like when people would play we'll use basketball reference again because it's what I know from Sportland, to be able to then visualize it. It's like if you played 2-on-1 in the key, right? So like you just from free throw line to the hoop, you got to play 1-on-2. So you're changing the space. So for exercise line, be okay. Can you do partials? Would be exercise. Like, can you go from here to here, and then you put your hands for targets, so that from there, like the person can know, can I change it? What happens when you try to get up here now? Then you try to push your arm forward. Like, what happens when you do that, right? Because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, can I do that? Do you know that your shoulder's going down when your arm's going up? Do you know that that's happening? Oh, I didn't know that. What happens if you went shoulder upward rotation first, or shoulder shrugging first, or elevation first, and then from there you went through glenohumeral flexion? Like, what would happen if you changed that? Can you do it together? Can you reach up together, bring this all up together? So I'm yes, they're feeling stuff internally and reporting on that, and then from there I then do my output work, which is okay. Are we going to do an isometric? Are we going to do some concentrics? Are we going to do some eccentric work, or what people in muscle system specialist land would call myometric to isometric to plyometric? So what am I choosing? And then what's the configuration? Like, are they seated? Are they standing? Are they laying on their back? Like, why am I choosing this stuff in this particular organization of the human body? Because it seems as though those constraints, right, the constraint-led approach tells us that each one of those varied positions may deliver a different, that may be based upon another memory, which then can anchor a new stimulus to then provide a different transfer. So their new opportunity. And differential learning is very similar to constraint-led approach, which I would absolutely butcher when it comes to explaining it. So differential learning has to do with, I believe, like the organization of when you're doing certain stuff when.
Okay, so in a nutshell, constraint-led approach is simply creating rules and set standards for what you're doing. And then the differential learning approach is simply organizing things in different ways to create maybe a different variance in the exercise in this case, so that your nervous system has to come up with the result with different types of inputs at different times.
Right. It's kind of like using a metronome, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was what I gather. I could be wrong. I could be butchering it. So I apologize if I am. So Robert Gray. So
it's almost really interesting how taking something which seems so simple firsthand and talking about it this way, it makes it so much more complicated.
Well, it can be, right, but it can also be really, really easy when we're observing. We're making an observation. Trying to recognize patterns of what somebody's going through, and then also patterns of what I choose to challenge somebody. Is this appropriate now? And then if it's not appropriate, how am I going to then slightly change a variable to make it a feasible challenge? Or am I just going to completely scrap it and then choose another challenge so that this person gets the stimulus that they need now? Because I don't want to waste their time and money.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not there to be their friend. I'm not there to beat the crap out of them. I'm there so when they're doing this stuff, they're feeling like they've worked, but they're like, man, I feel great. I've worked this hard and I feel great. Well, that's weird. So, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. That's the type of response that brings people back, because you know what they want to find? More things that help them feel good. They want to search for it, and they want to know that they can do it, because one of the I think one of the most innate things of humans is, number one, relating to people that have a shared interest. Number two, that they want to do the best that they can at something, as long as it's a challenge that's actually something that they can succeed at, right? Like, it has to be within a certain level of challenge. And then that people want to be proficient at something. I think they really want to know that they did well at something. So in what we do, there's no way to do it wrong. It's like the only way that they do it wrong is if they stop doing something, they don't talk to you. Like, wow, I had one person, like, he did something. I'm using like way too many times. And I asked him what he was experiencing while he was doing it, right? Because it looked like it was painful. He's like, I don't know, you tell me. I'm like, well, I'm thoroughly confused. So I'm like, are you asking me to then guess what you're experiencing as you're going through it? Do you think that's the best use of our time? It's like, we're going. It's like, as soon as we're going through these challenges, I have challenges I'm going to write down. I'm going to start popping challenges. I'm going to see how long it takes to rest. I'm going to say, like, well, maybe I'll do some local muscular endurance. Now I need to shift gears towards that, because they're really feeling good with that and they want to work hard through that. So now I'm going to start boosting up what I'm going to do, because I want to get them working hard as soon as possible. And I want them to realize how much harder they worked, and that they recovered from that, and that they're capable of doing more. Like, I want them to know that they can do that. Yeah. And then eventually I want them to know that they can do that on their own and explore, so that they find more stuff that helps them feel better, rather than saying, well, hold on, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I want them to explore, and I want them to be active, and I want them to understand their own constraints. So it's not like, okay, I went from not being able to really walk to then I'm going to go walk a couple miles and wonder why I feel like crap. It's like they see the progression, because I'm like, okay, why don't you try going for 5 minutes? Why don't you try going for 10 minutes? Why don't you try to double it? So that they see the progression, they see how they're getting better, they feel it, and then they can articulate it to me so that I know what even happened. Because otherwise I'm just guessing.
That's that self-awareness piece. I mean, that's very empowering for people when you especially have someone who just hasn't done anything maybe in 20 years, and you take them from doing little bit and build them up to something they thought they never do. That just completely shifts who they are in a lot of ways, which is such an amazing thing. And I think for people who listen to this, is if you say have pain in an exercise or doing certain movements, it doesn't mean you should avoid that entirely, but it might just mean you have to figure out what's the recipe you have to cook up to make it so that your brain doesn't recognize the motion, and so that you can create a stimulus for that area and not have pain. And then maybe going back to that thing that did hurt, and maybe it doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah,
or not.
That's a good point.
It's just, it is crazy, man. But, this kind of lends into a question I'm curious to hear what your answer is. And the question really is what is your take on the current mainstream fitness industry stuff? Like,
there's a lot of it, isn't there? The sexualization of fitness is funny to me. And also, when it comes down to the belief that, number one, let me start over. There are many facets to the mainstream exercise approach, and first of all, I want people to understand that understanding yourself, understanding what's okay, understanding what's not okay for you is prime directive. Being able to articulate that to someone that is an exercise professional that's actually studied physiology, actually studied biomechanics, that understand how to ask questions about how to progress and what to progress when, and how to load so that it gives you the best opportunity for progression faster, rather than hitting a dead end where someone's like, well, I'm all out of options. The way that I solved this problem was to mash it with a golf ball, or to then do some petrissage, or to use a Theragun, or to smash it with a foam roller, or to stretch it with some floss or whatever. It's like there's so many different pieces in between that aren't just not even utilized.
Mm-hmm.
And when professionals realize that that exercise is a modality, it goes all the way back to Bernstein's degrees of freedom problem. Nikolai Bernstein, where he was talking about, like, how many different degrees of freedom do you have to control, let alone the trillions of cells that have to report to each other in order to then have you perceive, so that you know whether you feel better or not better, because you're the only person that's ever going to know if you're feeling better or not feeling better. And to me, that is so much more empowering and impactful than aesthetics. Because in the long term, what are people going to hang their hat on? Their aesthetics, or the fact that their vitality is high, their longevity is high, they're doing challenges that keeps them moving for what they love to do for a lifetime, rather than thinking that they're just a better squatter, bench presser, that they're going to stay 20 years old for the rest of their life, which they're not. Like, life happens. So as the mainstream approach still goes from fad to fad and sexy thing to sexy thing, that's why there's still 12% of the people that join gyms, or like up to 20% of the people that exercise, where exercise utilization could be about really feeling way much better if the professionals that were involved with it, especially like people like us, had a better way of articulating what it actually did, rather than complaining about it. It's like taking the initiative to educate people of, if you're going to therapy, physical therapy, or using exercise for pain, do you know what a pain response is? Do you know how many people have degraded or I would say age-related changes to their spine over the age of 50 or over the age of 80. How many people have torn labrums in their hip past this age, or their shoulder past this age, so that people know the real data. And then how does that relate to how they feel this thing that they do not like? Because they still believe if it hurts here, it has to be here. And a lot of the practitioners believe the same thing.
Mm.
And that's just not true. It's not true at all. So it's true in some cases, but a majority, I would say, it's not.
Yeah, it's just essentially superficial way of looking at things. And you're right, that traps you. I mean, it leaves you with like 3 things to think about, and then if those don't work, you're screwed. And what now? Now you go to PT, and they think about the same things, and in the vicious cycle you are.
Well, that was something my wife brought up the other day, and she's like, "Well, I don't know, my wife comes into the shop to get worked on 3 times a week. And before that, she wouldn't work out at all because the stuff that I did, I think it lacked the progression in order to see, like, she would feel better and then she would stay away, and then she would feel better and then she would stay away, because I didn't have this way to progress things the way I do now to have a better understanding of it a decade ago. I just didn't have it, right? And now things have changed so drastically because I had the time to improve it, that she feels so different when she does these physical challenges. And she's like, what would happen? I'm like, well, usually what happens to a lot of people, they have a pain in this area. They see a doctor for the pain in the area. They either have medications or injections or a procedure, or they go to physical therapy where they work on that specific area. And now they're starting to do some holistic stuff, but it's primarily going to be trying to release something, right? And then try to strengthen something around this released tissue, because they believe that releasing it is helping, which short term could feel better. Long term may change the sensory motor output, or sensory motor detection system, right? Which can affect motor output. So then it's like, okay, then they're not getting any better at moving the stuff and challenging the stuff, which the challenges actually lay down more tissue to support the torque generators that help control the joint. So they're not doing the stuff that's necessary to condition the fuel utilization of the area, to spark protein, to make sure that they're building protein, that they're stimulating their osteoblasts, so that they get, and they're getting enough stimulation through all the soft tissue. This is not happening if they're not doing the specific exercise response and strengthening it up through what they have experienced neurologically.
It's so funny because it's a lot of words, but in a sense, it's very simple. It's
like, if you do not do the challenges, you will not get the benefit.
Yeah, it's funny because it's not. I mean, it's not funny. We're always looking for the silver bullet, the one fix that will just do everything for me, right? Let's just make it easy. I don't want to have to do anything. I just want the pill. Want to feel good. This challenge stuff, it's not for me, man. I don't want it. You ever have people say that to you?
Oh yeah, and I don't work with them. It's like, I only work with people that want to experience it and want to feel custom challenges to their system, so that they can experience it for themselves. See if, and that's why we do the consult. That's why I set up a plan. They experience the plan, and they have an opportunity to say no after the consult, after I present the plan. And as we're going through this, I'm like, hey, we're going to go through this step by step. The whole point is to get you to be able. Usually, it's like, I want to be able to work on my lawn. I want to be able to shovel snow. I want to be able to go for a walk with my kids. I'm like, well, what do you think it's going to take in order for you to be able to go on a walk with your grandkids, or get down on the ground and come back up while you're playing with your 1-year-old and you're 70? What do you think it's going to take? Like, I want to know what your expectations are, because if they're the same as my expectations, then we got something. If not, then this is going to be difficult, and I don't think it's a good fit, because I'd be lying to them. And so I do that right off the bat. I saw a post the other day. I talked about there was a pill coming out that could replace exercise. I'm like, okay, first of all, the stimulus of localized regions first of all, what do we even mean by exercise, right? Because a lot of people say like, well, I run, I bike. I'm like, cool. You're doing systematic endurance work that you believe is targeted towards a specific goal. Where I'm talking about is that any part of the system that gets better at being controlled may have a huge impact on other parts of the system, because that's why it's a system. It's not an individual piece thing. These are all pieces of a system that have to report to each other, where you may have transfer that looks nothing like the thing that you thought could transfer this thing to. So if that's the same part as, oh, I did this foot thing and I feel it in my neck. Well, that's how that can happen, because no exercises are done independently. Yeah. They're all total body experiences. It's impossible. Yeah.
Again, especially on the table, like you find a weak link, you might find 10, and you address one, and they're all gone, which is always crazy.
or it could change if somebody is fatigued in a different state, right? So it's like understanding the states that somebody's in, how long it took for them to get to fatigue, how long it took them to actually recover from perturbing the system in a specific way that's repeatable for you as a practitioner. Cool. Really cool. Yeah. If we're just pulling numbers out of thin air because somebody else did a best squat thing or best bench thing, or if you do this type of work with a pre-stretch on your tricep thing, okay, cool. Like that's what you believe. Awesome. And it's backed by a paper. Cool. Like how many things can be proven in how many different variables are there in a human going into these studies?
Yeah. There's some of the worst studies is exercise science.
Well, I mean, they're doing the best way that they can to set it up, right? And it's like they're getting data out there, or they're getting these studies out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is the only way that this stuff can happen, or that's exactly what somebody else even wants. So, what does somebody want? What are the challenges that are line up for helping that person achieve their goal, because it gives them the autonomy that they're looking for, and you're helping them to become curious about the things that can help them give them their autonomy. They're giving themselves their autonomy, and I'm just here to facilitate that. And until the practitioner believes that, hey, I did this for them. Like, no, I didn't. Like, they're doing this for them. I'm here to help them find it for themselves. That's it. It's not about me. It's about them finding their own autonomy, their levels of challenge, what they're okay with, and then watching that progress happen so that they feel good about what they're doing.
Makes perfect sense to me, man. But I will say, everyone should be doing 3 sets of 12. That's just
well, it was what the Arnold Schwarzenegger, everything with the 3 sets of 10 with the water drinking.
Yeah. It's it's funny, but it's also just, it will come together hopefully in the next 50 years.
I think Tom Purvis said it best, was where a majority of things changes when the old guard just tends to die, and then the people with the different ideas, they come in and now they're commonplace, and things come and go. Hopefully the ideas that are now permeating the space are ones of exploration, discovery, and then inquisition. Like, I want to be inquisitive about understanding these are theories, understanding that things may not be right, or I may not be correct, and okay, what am I going to do to pivot to upgrade my understanding of physiology and someone else's physiology, and how does that matter in this context of this professional relationship to help them get where they want to go, so that my ego is put aside and my identity is all about, okay, my identity is secure. My role is I'm here to help them. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what's going to happen every single time that somebody comes in our shop.
It's one thing I would say for people as we wrap up here is, like, if you're working with a professional, which, I encourage anybody to do, but just make sure that they're, like you said, someone who's attentive and listening and asking questions, and they're not just telling you what to do and already have the answers, because so many people do that. And if you find you're with someone like that, probably not the best situation, unless you just want to, someone to tell you everything. But growth will be minimized for sure.
I mean, that's exactly why. That's why I have these two outlets. With Body Activation, we have our YouTube channel for Body Activation LLC. We have over 500 videos on it. We have some of our older stuff from COVID era, which was Explorations, which is a self-diagnostic process that somebody can at least see, like how does raising my arm to the side feel in a bunch of configurations, and does it feel the same, and what do I do about it? All the way down to a whole bunch of random exercises that people can pick and choose to then say, okay, here's a great place to start for just being able to raise my leg to the side, or how I straighten my knee, or how I bend my knee, just to make it in really simple terms. And then from there, it's like, oh, now I have a free video that allows somebody to then experiment in a safe way, and then conclude for themselves what they want to do next. And for the practitioner side, we have Biz Body, which is for personal trainers and for massage therapists and other body workers that are starting their own personal practice. So if you're a one-on-one personal trainer, one-on-one practitioner, muscle system specialist, you name it, it's basically how to build your practice, and different resources for free resources that you can be using right now to help make sure that your practice gets from where you are now to where you want to be. So how do you produce your vision? So
that's awesome. What is so the YouTube thing? That is just something you can just go on and do yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Body Activation LLC on YouTube.
Okay, I'll check that out. I'm interested to see what that looks like. What do you, if I'm not mistaken, you also will consult virtually, or is that not a thing you do anymore?
Oh, I do that just randomly. If there's a business owner or a personal trainer that's doing their own thing, I help guide people. I usually do like 1 or 2 calls a month,
Okay.
and I do it just pro bono. It's like I like to see people that want to put their clients first. They have the energy to go out on their own and try to become successful, and they want to put the work in. I think it's important to guide more practitioners like that to help them become successful, so that they can do stuff that can really support their own community. Yeah. So that's the highest lever that I can do with the time constraints that I have running my own business.
Well, I mean, that's really generous of you doing that pro bono. Do you offer virtual sessions with people anymore after COVID, or is that over now?
Well, my model for our gym is different, and it's going to change again because we're going to be looking at a different space pretty soon. I want a rectangular space instead of one with offices. So, and I definitely love exercise equipment. So I'm going to have a multitude of different pieces that we have from storage. We're going to take those out of storage, eventually have a regeneration area that can provide red light, contrast tubs, sauna. So we have people can sign up for those. We have the one-on-one sessions. We have the exercise tables. Call them exercise tables, not massage therapy tables. So we have our exercise tables, which is an elevated floor, and to do manual resistance work on, or use other pieces for. So then people come in, they have a choice. They can do personal training sessions, or they can have a benefit of signing up for our monthly plan. In our monthly plans, you not only get your designated hour a week with or session a week with a practitioner, but then all of your plans are actually written out on an app delivered to you, so that you can modify that. That's where a lot of the exercise videos go to. We use Train Heroic to then give exercise suggestions. People then do that stuff on their own, or ask for help while they're in the gym at random times throughout the day, and they get more stimulus that way. And also we get to read what they report on the app, so that I know exactly what they're going through. And then when it's time for their session again to do exercise design, I can then use that data in order to then use the Train Heroic stuff. And so it becomes a whole cycle of, okay, if I'm I'm invested in you, you're invested in me. The only way that you have a guaranteed time slot is if you commit monthly. So
That's nice. You have a lot of options for people. If someone, since you're in Wisconsin, I'm in California, if someone listening to this who doesn't live in Wisconsin wanted to consult with you, is that something that you would offer, or not anymore?
I don't really offer that much anymore. It's the ability to do in-person work is just too valuable, and it can be. I haven't been able to repeat that virtually.
Yeah.
So it's just the perturbations and a lot of the manual tests, as far as and the exercise creation. There's just too much to miss in observation wise to then progress people as quickly as I would like to see them progress, and or to know whether or not I even can progress them, because sometimes I can't, right? And I'm like, hey, you're in the wrong spot. Something else is going on. Maybe see another professional, because I want you to get better now, and you're not. And you're not responding well to the stuff that I do. There may be a fracture. There may be something else going on. I would say get that checked out, and then we can talk later. And then from there, because I want, again, not wasting time, not wasting money. It's like I just go. I'm fast. So.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. Doing virtuals was really, really challenging. It's not an easy feat. Now, if someone has maybe 7 cameras and maybe then.
Well, I think it's good for people that want to stay active, and if somebody doesn't have too much going on, and I'm like, great, and to me, the value of that, that's the stuff in this exercise space that's scalable, and I think it's good if people want that type of group setting and they want to stay active and do stuff. I just believe from my own experience that it's too general to solve specific problems. So having a generalist and then having someone who can be specific, that can work very well if those two people are working in tandem. Right? Mm-hmm. It can be very powerful, because it's like, I want people to stay active. I want people to explore stuff, and I want them to be able to modify things themselves, because they know if it feels good or if it just feels awful.
Yeah.
So
that like you mentioned, autonomy and just kind of creating the understanding so that they can do this themselves for life is really the end goal. So that makes perfect sense for me, man.
And then I also want to connect with, lastly, before we go, with other professionals that I'm not a threat. I want the same thing that they want. I want people to do sustainable exercise. I don't like fads, and I want to make sure that people understand that there's so many different ways to stay active out there, as long as it's appropriate for their physiology and their anatomy and what they're okay with.
Yeah, that's a wise thing. When I started doing this stuff, I was so dogmatic, as anyone new learning something new does. It's too confusing to overwhelm your brain with all the options. When you settle in, you start to recognize that was a mistake, and that you're right. Like, look, someone wants to ride a bike, wants to swim, wants to do HIIT classes on the weekend. All great, as long as they tolerate it, and we can check in once in a while to make sure they're doing it right.
100%.
That's smart, man. Dude, thank you so much for doing this. This was awesome. I learned quite a bit myself, actually.
It's a great discussion. It's always fun talking with you, Eric. Thanks for having me on the show, man.
100%. Maybe we can do this again. I feel like I didn't even ask like a third of the questions on the.
Yeah, you had so many questions. I love it. I was like, yeah, you got a lot to ask. That's cool. That's really cool. And whenever you want to have another discussion, I'm all for it. So thank you again for having me, and I always look forward to it.
Cool, man. Thank you. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll talk to you soon, man.
Sounds good. Bye.